I will never forget what my cruel mother-in-law did to my innocent son. That day left a mark on me I can never erase. My sweet 3-year-old, Jack, has a serious peanut allergy, something she knew very well. Still, while I was away, she deliberately forced him to eat a peanut butter sandwich. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. His little face broke out in a violent rash, his lips swelling as he gasped for air. But the worst part wasn't the sandwich. It was what she did after he refused to eat more. What happened next still haunts me. It was something so heartless, so shocking, that no mother should ever have to witness it. My name is Olivia Bennett, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a senior technician in a private pathology lab in the city. I've always been detail-oriented and careful, traits that serve me well both in my work and my personal life. I live with my husband Liam, who is 36 and a home design consultant. He's well known in the community for his architectural flair and calm demeanor. Together, we have a beautiful 3-year-old son named Jack. Jack is the light of our lives, smart, cheerful, always curious, but he has a severe peanut allergy that we discovered when he was just 6 months old. Since then, we've done everything possible to protect him. We carry his EpiPen everywhere, educate caregivers, and avoid places or situations that might expose him to peanuts. Despite these efforts, there's always a lingering fear in my heart that someone might ignore the seriousness of his condition. That fear wasn't just paranoia, it was a warning that I should have paid even more attention to. Jack's allergy has always been a sensitive subject in our family, not because of Jack himself, but because of my mother-in-law, Linda. From the very beginning, Linda refused to believe that food allergies were real. She often said things like, "In my day, kids ate whatever was on the table and grew up just fine." Every time I tried to explain Jack's allergy to her, how even a trace amount of peanut could send him into anaphylactic shock, she would roll her eyes and say I was overreacting. I even gave her the official diagnosis papers from Jack's pediatric allergist, but she dismissed them as Dr. Drama. Her daughter Anna, my sister-in-law, often stood by her mother's side. Whenever the topic came up, Anna would mutter, "Well, Mom does have a point," as if that somehow justified ignoring a child's medical condition. Their attitudes created a growing rift between me and Liam's side of the family. I tried to keep things civil for Jack's sake, but it wasn't easy. Things really worsened after Jack was born. Linda constantly insisted that my kids ate everything and claimed I was turning Jack into a fragile child. At family events, she would mock the separate snacks I packed for Jack and loudly ask, "Why can't he just eat what everyone else is eating?" Once, I even caught her trying to give Jack a bite of her peanut-laden dessert. I had to snatch the spoon away and pull Jack aside before anything happened. Liam tried to act as the peacemaker, telling me things like, "Mom's just set in her ways," or "Don't take it personally." But that just made me feel more alone in dealing with a problem that could literally cost our child his life. 1 week ago, everything came to a breaking point. I was called in for an emergency night shift at the lab. It wasn't my usual schedule, but we had a crisis with contaminated samples, and I was needed on site. Jack usually stayed at daycare during the day and was home with me at night, but this time was different. Liam had to be out of town for a work conference. With both of us unavailable, we needed someone to look after Jack overnight. I hesitated, but in the end, we accepted Linda's offer to babysit. She had been pushing to spend more time with Jack, claiming she could handle it. Against my better judgment, and because we didn't have many other options, I agreed. Still, I wasn't careless. Before leaving, I went over everything in painstaking detail. I packed Jack's meals and snacks, labeling each container and including a big note that read, "No peanuts." I laid out the emergency EpiPen and demonstrated how to use it, again. I printed a list of foods to avoid and stuck it on the fridge. I must have reminded her a dozen times, "Please, Linda, don't give him anything outside of what I packed." Her response? A dramatic sigh and an eye roll followed by, "You're being overly dramatic again, Olivia." But fine. The entire night at work, I felt uneasy. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a text or call, praying everything would go smoothly. I had originally been scheduled to work until 3 p.m. the next day, but luckily, my replacement arrived early, so I was able to clock out around 2 p.m. I remember feeling so relieved. I get to see Jack sooner than expected. I was tired to my bones, but the thought of my little boy's smile gave me energy. I couldn't wait to scoop him up, hear his laugh, and maybe finally soak in a warm bath after a stressful shift. It was just after 2 p.m. when I pulled up in front of the house. The sky was overcast, and a light breeze rustled the trees, but I barely noticed. My mind was on Jack. I grabbed my bag, walked up to the door, and let myself in. "I'm home," I called out as I stepped inside, expecting to hear Linda's usual sarcastic greeting or Jack's tiny footsteps rushing toward me. But the house was oddly quiet. Then I heard the TV playing in the living room and Jack's familiar giggle echoing faintly through the hallway. "Linda? Jack." I called again, dropping my bag near the entrance. Still no answer. As I walked into the living room, the world around me seemed to slow. My heart sank into my stomach. There, sitting comfortably on the couch, was Jack, smiling, happy, and completely unaware of the danger in front of him. On the coffee table in front of him was a plate with a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich. I could smell it from across the room, the sharp, oily scent of peanuts. Linda sat next to him, watching him with a proud expression on her face, like she'd just done something remarkable. My chest tightened, and the blood drained from my face. I froze, the air sucked out of my lungs. "What are you doing?" I screamed, my voice cracking with panic. Linda looked up, surprised. "You're back already? It's not even 3 yet." My instincts took over. I tried to rush toward Jack, but Linda stood up and blocked my path. "What did you feed him?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fear. "What he wanted. What normal kids eat," she said, folding her arms. "You're just being overprotective, Olivia." I stared at her, stunned. "What are you thinking? I've told you again and again, Jack has a peanut allergy. I even showed you the doctor's diagnosis." Linda's face hardened. "Be quiet. He'll get used to it if you stop coddling him." That's how Anna got over hers. That was it. Something inside me snapped. I shoved Linda aside, not roughly but firmly, and rushed to Jack's side. His cheeks were flushed, and a red rash was forming around his eyes. He was scratching at his neck, and in the softest, weakest voice, he said, "Mommy, my throat feels funny." I dropped to my knees in front of Jack, trying to stay calm even as my hands shook. His breathing was getting heavier, his lips starting to puff up. I gently touched his forehead and cheeks. His skin was warm and blotchy, and the swelling was visibly increasing. I had seen this before in medical case files and emergency training sessions, but this time it was my own child. This was the early stage of anaphylactic shock, and I didn't have time to waste. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here," I whispered, brushing a lock of hair off his forehead. I sprang up and opened the drawer in the side table where I'd placed the EpiPen just in case. Thank God it was still there. I yanked off the safety cap, knelt down, and injected it into Jack's thigh through his pants. He whimpered slightly, but didn't cry. He was too focused on the tightness in his chest, the itching in his throat, and the confusion clouding his eyes. "What are you doing?" Linda gasped behind me. "That's not necessary. It's just a little rash. Call an ambulance." I snapped, my voice nearly cracking. But she didn't move. She just stood there, frowning. "You're overreacting again. Jack's fine. Anna had the same rash when she was little." "I told you." I didn't wait to hear the rest. Jack was gasping now, his little hands clutching at his throat as if trying to open it. His lips were pale and swollen, and his eyes were darting around in panic. "Jack," I cried. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 with my free hand, holding him close with the other. "My 3-year-old is having an anaphylactic reaction. I've given him an EpiPen, but he's still worsening. Please send an ambulance now." I looked up. Linda was still standing there, pale and speechless, finally realizing what she had done. Her mouth opened slightly. I didn't think." "You didn't think?" I spat, holding Jack tighter. "You fed him poison." I couldn't wait for the ambulance. I scooped Jack into my arms, bolted toward the front door, and rushed to the car. Linda tried to follow. "I'll come too," she said in a trembling voice. I turned around, my eyes ice cold. "You've done enough. Stay here. Call Liam and tell him the truth." I strapped Jack into his car seat, tears clouding my vision, and slammed the door shut. As I sped off toward the hospital, I saw Linda's figure shrinking in the rearview mirror, her hands trembling at her sides, the first hints of real fear on her face. I drove faster than I ever had in my life. The hospital wasn't far, just 10 minutes away, but every red light, every slow car ahead of me felt like a personal threat. Jack whimpered in the back seat, clutching his stuffed bunny, his breathing labored. I kept talking to him to keep him awake. "Stay with me, baby. We're almost there. Mommy's here." As soon as I pulled into the emergency entrance of the hospital, I jumped out and yanked open the back door. A nurse who recognized me rushed out with a gurney as I screamed. "Severe anaphylaxis." I already used the EpiPen. Within seconds, Jack was on the stretcher, wheeled into the ER while another nurse helped me fill out emergency paperwork. I could barely hold the pen. The charge nurse had already paged Dr. Kim, one of the pediatric specialists and someone I had worked with many times. When she arrived, her expression changed the moment she saw Jack. He was given additional injections, epinephrine, steroids, and antihistamines, while nurses fitted him with an oxygen mask. I stood by the treatment room's window, watching helplessly, tears silently streaming down my cheeks. My hands still trembled from adrenaline and rage. I stepped into the hallway and shakily called Liam. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's going on?" "I just landed. Everything okay?" "No," I said, trying to steady my voice. "You need to get to the hospital. Jack, he had an allergic reaction. A serious one." I gave him the EpiPen and drove straight here. "Oh my God," he gasped. "What happened?"
How?
"Your mother gave him a peanut butter sandwich," I said quietly. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. Then, firmly, "I'm on my way." After about 30 agonizing minutes, Dr. Kim came out of the treatment room. "Olivia," she said gently. "Jack's responding well. His oxygen levels are stabilizing, but we'd like to keep him overnight for observation. Just in case." I nodded, wiping my face. "Thank you." She put a reassuring hand on my shoulder and walked away. I stepped into Jack's room and sat beside his small hospital bed, taking his tiny hand into mine. He looked so small, his cheeks blotchy and eyes tired, but he was safe for now. A few minutes later, I heard hurried footsteps in the hallway and Liam's voice calling, "Kathy?" Then catching himself, "Olivia?" He burst into the room, his eyes wide with worry, and rushed to Jack's bedside. Behind him stood Linda and Anna. A familiar fire rose in my chest. Liam leaned over Jack, brushing his hand over our son's hair with trembling fingers. "Is he okay?" he asked, his voice choked. "He's stable now," I answered, barely able to hold back my emotion. But it was close. Too close. Liam sat beside Jack, staring at his pale face and bruised arm where the 4 was inserted. The beeping of the monitor filled the silence between us, tense and heavy. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me. "How did this happen?" he whispered. I didn't take my eyes off Jack as I answered, "Why don't you ask your mother?" He turned, and I saw him freeze as he looked back at Linda and Anna, who stood just outside the doorway. Linda looked smaller than usual, her confident posture gone, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Anna had an arm around her, but even she looked shaken. "Mom," Liam said, his voice low but laced with anger. "What happened?" Linda stepped forward, but I stood up and blocked her from entering. "You're not coming in here," I said firmly. "You put Jack's life in danger." "I didn't mean to," she said, her voice trembling. "I just thought." "What was best?" I snapped. "You thought giving him a peanut butter sandwich was best? After everything I've told you? After all the warnings? After the doctor's diagnosis? After I showed you how to use the EpiPen?" Anna stepped in, trying to mediate. "Olivia, Mom made a mistake. She didn't mean any harm. You know that. Don't you dare try to minimize what happened, I said, glaring at her. Jack could have died. You think this is just a mistake? This is neglect. This is betrayal. Just then, Dr. Kim entered the room. Her professional calm was still intact, but I could see the tension in her eyes as she glanced around at all of us. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but this is the ICU. I need you all to keep your voices down. She looked at me. Olivia, is everything okay here? I explained everything briefly, my voice tight and controlled. When I finished, Dr. Kim's expression hardened. Mrs. Bennett, she said, addressing Linda formally. Do you understand that your grandson's life was in serious danger today? If he had arrived just a few minutes later, the outcome might have been very different. Linda's lips trembled. I didn't think it was that serious. Dr. Kim nodded slowly. That's exactly the problem. Ignoring a known, documented medical condition, especially one with life-threatening potential, is a form of negligence. As hospital staff, we are required to report this to Child Protective Services. Liam's head snapped toward her. Report it? But it's the law, Dr. Kim said firmly. And in this case, it is completely justified. I turned back to Jack and gently kissed his forehead. We'll do whatever it takes to protect him. From anyone. Liam didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he slowly stood and faced his mother. Mom, I need you to tell me the truth. Why did you give Jack peanuts? The hallway outside Jack's ICU room was tense and quiet. Liam had led his mother and Anna just a few steps away from the door, trying to keep his voice low but firm. I stood back, still inside, watching through the glass as the conversation unfolded, my heart racing, arms crossed tightly across my chest. Linda gripped a balled-up handkerchief, her voice shaky as she began. I really believed he was being raised too delicately. In my day, kids just grew strong by eating everything on the table. I didn't think food could be that dangerous. Liam's brows furrowed. But we told you. Over and over. You saw the medical reports. I thought maybe if he kept trying it, she whispered, his body would adjust. I did the same with Anna when she was little, and she got over it. For a long moment, Anna stood frozen. Then her eyes widened, and something changed in her face. She stepped forward, her voice tight.
No, Mom.
That's not true. What? Linda looked confused, her voice small. I didn't have a peanut allergy, Anna said slowly. It was a mild rash once, and I was taken to the doctor. He said it was nothing serious. You just ignored the diagnosis and told everyone you cured me by feeding me more peanuts. That never happened. Linda stared at her daughter in disbelief. But I thought. You thought you were right, Anna said, her voice cracking. You always think you're right, even when it puts someone in danger. Liam looked back and forth between his mother and sister, his face pale. So, you've been using a made-up story to justify your decisions, and now Jack is the one who almost paid for it with his life. Linda burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. I didn't know. I didn't think. But you were told. I interrupted, stepping into the hallway now. You were told, and you still chose to ignore everything. Because you believed you knew better. Linda looked up, eyes red and wet with tears. I just thought you were being too careful. I didn't mean to hurt him. Liam straightened his shoulders. His expression was calm, but there was steel in his voice. Mom, what you did today is unforgivable. You endangered our son's life. We need space. Linda's voice cracked. What does that mean? For now, he said quietly, I want you to stay away from Jack. Until you fully understand how serious his allergy is, and until we're confident this will never happen again. Linda covered her mouth, sobbing silently. Anna gently guided her away down the hallway, their footsteps echoing on the tile floor. I returned to Jack's bedside and sat beside Liam. We said nothing for a long time. We didn't need to. We both knew what had just happened would change everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and difficult choices. Jack stayed in the hospital overnight for observation. By the next morning, The swelling in his face had gone down, and his breathing had stabilized. Seeing him sit up in bed, eating a cup of applesauce and watching cartoons, was like a miracle. I didn't leave his side once. Liam slept on the chair next to me, waking up every hour just to check on him. When Jack was finally discharged, we brought him home and adjusted our schedules so we could both stay with him full-time for a while. I took a leave of absence from the lab, and Liam postponed some client meetings. Neither of us wanted to leave Jack alone for even a moment. We were still shaken, and the trust we had placed in our family had been shattered. During that week, Linda called several times. I didn't answer. Liam did once or twice, but only to keep things clear. She wanted to come over and see Jack, to explain herself, to apologize. But we weren't ready. Not after what had happened. Only Anna came to visit. She brought groceries and offered to help around the house. I appreciated the gesture, even if my heart wasn't fully open. She sat quietly with me one afternoon while Jack napped, her eyes full of regret. "Mom is sorry," she said quietly. But honestly, I don't know if she really understands how serious this was. That same afternoon, we received a visit from a social worker named Jessica. She introduced herself as a case investigator from Child Protective Services, responding to the report submitted by the hospital. Jessica was kind, professional, and direct. "I know this is a lot to handle," she said gently, "but we need to ensure Jack's safety and confirm that steps are being taken to prevent this kind of incident from happening again." We sat with her at the dining table and went through everything: how we had warned Linda repeatedly, shown her medical reports, taught her how to use the EpiPen, and still she had ignored it all. Jessica took detailed notes, nodding thoughtfully. "I understand," she said. "In this situation, considering legal options, including a restraining order, is very common, especially when the danger to a child is well documented and the caregiver has shown repeated disregard for safety." I looked at Liam, then back at Jessica. "We're not trying to destroy our family," I said. "But Jack comes first. Always." Jessica nodded. "That's exactly the priority you should have." That evening, after Jack was tucked into bed, Liam and I sat together at the kitchen table. His fingers were interlaced with mine. "We need to take action," he said. I nodded. "Let's call Mark Wilson in the morning." The following morning, we met with Mark Wilson, a well-respected family attorney we had worked with once before when drawing up our will after Jack was born. When we explained what had happened, down to every heartbreaking and reckless detail, he listened carefully, occasionally scribbling notes. His expression grew more serious with each sentence. "Even if there was no intent to harm," Mark said, leaning forward, "what your mother-in-law did still qualifies as clear negligence under state law. Given the medical documentation, your repeated warnings, and the hospital report, you have a strong case. The court will almost certainly prioritize Jack's safety." "What are our options?" Liam asked quietly. "You can apply for a temporary restraining order, effective immediately upon approval. It will prevent her from approaching Jack or entering your home," Mark explained. "We can also submit a full statement, attach the hospital's medical records, the CPS report, and any text or voice messages that reflect her disregard for the allergy warnings. Later, we'll have a formal hearing where the court will decide whether to issue a longer-term order and what additional conditions may apply." We both looked at each other. It felt heavy, legal action against Liam's own mother, but after everything that had happened, it didn't feel wrong. It felt necessary. "I'll file the paperwork today," Mark said, "and we'll request the hearing as soon as possible." 2 days later, we received confirmation. The court had granted an emergency restraining order. Linda was prohibited from coming within 100 feet of Jack or entering our home without permission. The order would remain in effect for 2 weeks, until the formal hearing. That evening, Linda called. When Liam answered and told her about the court order, I could hear her voice through the speaker, panicked, trembling. "How could you do this to me?" she cried. "I'm his grandmother. I just made a mistake." "No, Mom," Liam replied steadily. "You ignored us. You risked his life. This isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting our son." "But I didn't mean," she began. "Yes, you didn't mean to," Liam said, his tone calm but unyielding. "But you still did it. And until we're sure you truly understand that, we need space. After that call, things escalated in an unexpected way. Linda began telling her friends, especially people from her church, that we were turning her own grandson against her and treating her like a criminal. But the reaction she received wasn't the one she expected. What Linda hadn't anticipated was that our community, especially the parents, didn't take her side. In fact, the backlash was immediate. Several members of her church, especially younger families with children who had allergies or special needs, began to pull away from her. People she had known for years stopped returning her calls. One mother even told her point-blank, "You could have killed your grandson." What kind of grandmother ignores a medical condition like that? Even in places where she once held a respected voice, she found doors beginning to close. Her social circle, which had been a source of pride, became uncomfortably quiet. And while Anna remained in contact with her, even she started speaking to her mother with more caution, her tone firmer than I had ever heard. Anna visited us again a few days later. She sat across from me in the living room, nervously twisting her fingers. "I've been talking to Mom," she said. "She's devastated. But to be honest, I still don't think she fully grasps what she did." I sighed, rubbing my temples. Does she know what anaphylactic shock actually means? That his throat was closing, that if I hadn't come home early, he could have been gone by the time the ambulance got there? Anna nodded slowly. I told her, over and over. But she keeps going back to this idea that she was trying to help him get used to peanuts. Like she can't accept that she was wrong. She wasn't just wrong, I said, my voice low. She was reckless. Anna didn't argue. I know. And I'm not defending her. I just wanted you to know she's trying. I don't know if it's enough. Later that week, we received another visit from Jessica, the social worker. She reviewed how Jack was doing, asked to see where the EpiPens were stored, and documented the steps we had taken since the incident. "Given everything you've done," Jessica said, "I think you're making all the right choices. But I still recommend following through with the court process. Even if your mother-in-law eventually understands, legal boundaries will give you the structure and safety your son needs right now." We thanked her, and after she left, Liam turned to me and said, "We're doing this, right?" I nodded. Yes. For Jack. 2 weeks after the emergency restraining order was issued, the formal court hearing took place. We arrived early, hand in hand, the weight of the last few weeks pressing down on us. Jack stayed home with a trusted neighbor. Mark Wilson, our attorney, met us at the courthouse with a thick folder of documents, medical records, the CPS report, text messages, and Linda's signed acknowledgement of Jack's diagnosis, which we had asked her to sign months ago, and she had casually dismissed. Linda arrived just before the hearing, escorted by her own attorney. She looked tired, older, and clearly nervous. Anna was with her, but kept her distance. Inside the courtroom, the judge, a composed woman in her 50s, opened the session and invited both sides to speak. Mark presented our case with calm precision, highlighting the sequence of events, our repeated warnings, the hospital's emergency treatment, and Linda's prior dismissal of medical advice. He stressed that this wasn't about cutting off a grandparent. It was about protecting a child with a life-threatening condition. When it was my turn to testify, I stood and took a deep breath. I explained Jack's condition to my mother-in-law countless times. I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. I gave her medical records. I taught her how to use the EpiPen. I labeled all his food. I even begged her not to give him anything outside his diet. And still, she fed him a peanut butter sandwich. My son could have died. If I hadn't come home early, we might not be standing here today. The judge nodded solemnly. Linda's attorney argued that her actions were not out of malice, that she had misunderstood, that she had believed she was helping. But the judge didn't seem moved. "Mrs. Bennett," the judge said, addressing Linda directly, "this court does not weigh intent as heavily as outcome when a child's safety is involved. Your actions, while perhaps not malicious, were undeniably negligent." She turned to us. "This court hereby extends a restraining order for a period of 6 months. During that time, Mrs. Bennet is forbidden from visiting the child without express written permission from the parents and will remain at least 100 feet away from the residence. Linda's face crumpled, but the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, due to the nature of this incident, you are ordered to complete a certified educational program on food allergies and pediatric care. You must also complete 200 hours of community service, preferably with an organization that works with children who have chronic health conditions. The gavel struck. The courtroom was silent. As we left the courthouse, Liam turned to his mother. His eyes were filled with sadness more than anger. "Mom, we need time. This isn't just about what you did. It's about what you refuse to believe. Jack's safety will always come first." Linda's voice was barely above a whisper. "I know. I was wrong. I endanger my grandson. I hope one day you can forgive me." Liam didn't respond. We simply walked away. Toward Jack, toward safety, toward a future where we wouldn't have to wonder whether our child was safe under the care of someone who didn't believe in his reality. In the months that followed the court hearing, we kept our distance from Linda. Jack's health came first, and every decision we made revolved around that principle. He continued to recover without any setbacks, and we restructured our lives around new safety protocols, emotional healing, and legal boundaries that brought a strange sort of comfort. The restraining order gave us the space we needed, and surprisingly, it also gave Linda time to reflect. To comply with the court's judgment, Linda enrolled in an educational program about food allergies. At first, she reportedly resisted, arguing with instructors, challenging information, but eventually, something seemed to shift. She not only completed the course but also signed up for additional workshops at a local hospital that specialized in pediatric nutrition and allergy management. It was a small gesture, but it carried weight. For her community service, Linda worked with a local support group for children with chronic illnesses. She helped organize materials, served meals at allergy-friendly events, and even participated in awareness campaigns. Slowly, her reputation in the community began to recover. Some people remained distant, but others acknowledged her efforts and saw the beginnings of change. Anna continued to visit us regularly. She never pressured us to forgive Linda, but made it clear that her mother was truly trying. That incident shook her, Anna said one evening as she sat with me on the porch. She was humiliated, yes, but more than that, she's finally realizing that her beliefs weren't just outdated, they were dangerous. Throughout that year, I began speaking at local schools and daycare centers about allergy awareness. I shared Jack's story, without naming names, to educate others about how easily a life-threatening reaction could happen and how preventable it truly is. Liam also joined some of these events, offering the father's perspective and the emotional toll of family conflict rooted in denial and stubbornness. We didn't speak to Linda until just after the one-year mark, when Jack's 4th birthday came around. Jack's 4th birthday was a warm Saturday afternoon, and we decided to host a small backyard party with just a few of his preschool friends, some neighbors, and close family. Balloons danced in the breeze, allergy-safe snacks were spread neatly across the picnic tables, and Liam manned the grill while I helped Jack unwrap a few presents from his friends. The laughter, the music, and the bright sun gave the day a sense of normalcy, a feeling we hadn't experienced in a long time. Just as the party was starting to wind down, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone else, and when I opened the door, my heart paused. It was Linda. She stood there alone, dressed plainly, holding a small gift bag in one hand and a thin hardcover book in the other. Her expression was soft, her voice quiet. I know I said I wouldn't come without permission, but I wanted to try. "I brought something for Jack, if it's okay." I didn't respond immediately. I called for Liam, who came to the front door, saw his mother, and looked at me. After a long pause, he gave a subtle nod. "Just for a little while," he said. Linda walked out into the backyard, her steps careful, and stopped near the edge of the garden where Jack was playing. She looked to me and Liam again before moving closer. When we nodded, she knelt beside Jack and gently said, "Jack, it's Grandma. Do you remember me?" Jack looked at her, confused at first, then glanced at me. I smiled gently and said, "It's okay." Jack turned back to her, his little face curious but calm. Hi. Linda opened the gift bag and pulled out a picture book titled Peter's Allergy Adventure. The cover showed a smiling cartoon boy with a peanut crossed out behind him. I got you this, she said. It's about a boy who has a peanut allergy, just like you. I took the book from her, flipped through the pages, and checked the content. It was safe, appropriate, and surprisingly well written. I handed it to Jack. Do you want to read it with Grandma? I asked. Jack nodded, and Linda sat beside him on the grass, reading softly. Her voice was gentler than I'd ever heard it, and Jack listened, asking questions now and then with interest. When they finished, she looked into his eyes and said, Jack, Grandma made a big mistake. A really big one. But I've learned since then. I promise I'll never do anything like that again. Jack blinked at her, and in the purest way only a child can, he replied, Okay, Grandma. That moment, simple as it was, hit me harder than I expected. I still wasn't ready to trust her completely. Maybe I never would. But there, in that moment, I saw something real. Later, as the guests were leaving and Jack went inside with his new toys, I walked Linda to the door. She stopped and turned to me. Thank you, she said quietly, for giving me a chance. I looked at her, measured my words carefully. We're just getting started, Linda. Trust takes time, but I'm glad to see you trying. She nodded slowly. I'll keep trying, as long as it takes. That night, after Jack had fallen asleep and the house was finally quiet, Liam and I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we had made the hardest decision of our lives just a year ago. He reached for my hand. What do you think? He asked. I took a deep breath. I think she's changing. I don't trust her fully yet, but she's taken the first step. Liam nodded. Then we'll take it one step at a time. We sat there in silence, watching the stars through the window, letting the weight of the past year rest gently on our shoulders, heavier than before, but somehow easier to carry now. Our family wasn't perfect, but it was healing. Slowly, cautiously, and with our son's safety always first. Thank you so much for watching this powerful story. If it moved you or made you think, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more real-life inspired stories that shed light on important issues, family dynamics, and emotional journeys. Your support helps us keep sharing these meaningful stories with the world. See you in the next video.